Hi, my name is Liz Rolfus, and for my research, I research significant influences on juvenile criminal activity. So, some background information. Within the past year, juvenile criminal activity has been at an all-time rise. Previous Chief Isaac Elliott of Cincinnati Police Department talked about the increase of access to high-powered guns within the youth, which have created more ways for involvement in juveniles and criminalizing activity. The Cincinnati Police Department has been looking for ways to help the youth and mentor them so that they can stay out of criminal activity. So the purpose of this research was to find some top influences that officers within the Cincinnati area have been able to observe within juveniles. By identifying these key issues, more programs can be directed to combat the issue of increased juvenile criminal offenders. So to begin the research, I researched some top influences that have been noticed between juveniles that are involved in crime. And then I created an 8-point questionnaire. And from that questionnaire, I recruited officers and detectives from the CIS Homicide Unit and District 3 within the Cincinnati Police Department. Officers were able to take a week and a half to compile their ideas and thoughts. And then from there, they answered my questions and asked any questions they needed. So to begin with the research questions, the first 3 were just basic demographic questions like age, gender, and how long they've been involved in law enforcement. And then I started off with a question for them to just speak on top influences that they've seen impact a juvenile. And then from there, I used the research to ask questions about peer influence, how mental health has played a big part in juvenile offender choices, the connection between abuse and neglect and criminal activity, and finally, social media and how that has impacted the scope of criminal activity. So, beginning with demographics, I was able to interview 6 participants. Of those participants, all of them were male between the ages of 32 and mid-50s. There's a large range of how long they had been involved in law enforcement, and so that created a good diversity. From there, I got the results, and the top influences that I hadn't really taken into better understanding was parenting and the influence of parents on their juveniles and how that can impact their decision making and who they choose to hang out with. Peers and parental influences seem to be the 2 biggest influences. It really impacts how they view themselves and how they feel a belonging within the community, which can impact what they choose to do and who they choose to be involved with. I did find, however, that abuse and neglect were not in direct correlation with families and their criminal activity. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I also found that mental health didn't really play that big of an impact on juvenile offenders as well. While many juvenile offenders could potentially have issues with mental health, it doesn't seem to be the biggest outlier. The biggest thing that I did find, however, was that social media seemed to be one of the biggest and most important roles in juveniles committing crimes. And so a lot of this has to do with social media creating role models for these individuals and their ability to kind of be influenced by these negative role models that they might find on social media. So overall, this study is important to future research because it allows more specific research to be done on each layer of the study. The Cincinnati Police Department has already started to work on programming to help mentor juveniles through the court system based off of the part of this questionnaire. Some of the limitations of my study were the small amount of participation, not having enough time, and the study being focused more so on Cincinnati and not on a national level. So in conclusion, mental health and abuse and neglect did not seem to directly correlate with juveniles and their criminal activity, but it does impact who an adolescent chooses to be around. But parental influence and social media were two of the biggest and most important influences on criminal activity. Um, Overall, the results of this study are very similar with others. It has a very strong influence on family and parental impact, and I found this in my study without even really realizing it. Thank you.